Welcome to FranESG, your guide to a sustainable future. Are you curious about how businesses can be more eco-friendly and social responsible? FranESG is the podcast for you. Whether you're considering a career switch, looking for an ESG job, or just want to understand ESG, we make it simple and relatable. We share real-life stories, expert advice, and practical tips. Perfect for anyone wanting to learn how ESG can improve businesses and our world. Join us on Fran ESG and start your journey towards a greener, more responsible future today.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hi, listeners. I'm here today with Chief of Staff Ana Benevides. I met Ana in Brazil a while ago this year for the Global Aviation and Aerospace Skills Task Force. And I just wanted everybody to hear what Ana Benevides has to say. Now, who she is, she's a very talented woman and Chief of Staff at ANAC. And ANAC is the Agência Nacional de Aviação Civil in Brazil. They have a fantastic program that I've been telling Ana, come on my podcast. Everyone has to hear about it. And the program is called Wings for All. And now on this podcast, I'm going to let Ana do most of the talking. You will all be amazed. So Ana, please tell us who you are and tell us about this program that you have created and that you can explain so wonderful. I always love to listen to you.
Hi, Francine. So it's such a nice thing to be here talking to you again. So first of all, I want to thank you for inviting me over. As you said, my name is Ana Benevides. I'm currently the Chief of Staff at ANAC. ANAC is the Civil Aviation Authority in Brazil. It's the national regulator for anything civil aviation-wise. And our Wings for All program, it's our diversity and inclusion program. So it's very much focused on the S of the ESG, on the social dimension of ESG. So you were very kind in your words, but there's a lot of work of a lot of people involved in this, and we're really, really proud and really passionate about our program. It's called in Portuguese Asas para Todos, which would translate to English as Wings for All. And we centered it around 3 different dimensions. The first one is women in aviation. I'm not sure if everyone knows, but we have a huge gender disparity in civil aviation. Women are only 5% of pilots worldwide, only 3% of maintenance engineers worldwide. And in Brazil, it's no different. In fact, in Brazil, we're doing a little worse than that. We are at 3% for pilots and 3% for maintenance technicians. So this program of the sub-program of women in aviation deals with gender disparity, and we're trying to foster a more inclusive environment for women in this dimension. But then we have also a second and a third dimension. And the second dimension is inclusion and diversity per se. And here we're dealing with racial issues, racial discrimination, and ableism, which is the discrimination against people with disabilities. And we're dealing here with accessibility rights, and we're dealing with education, of course, which brings me to the very last, the third, and the true spinal core of our program, the third branch, which is training and development, because we believe only education can foster a more inclusive society. So through the training and development branch, we're trying at the same time to train the people who are already in the industry. We want to make everyone aware of how to create an inclusive environment, an environment free of prejudice, but we are also focusing on giving new opportunities for more diverse talent. So people who come from a socio-economic background and an underprivileged socio-economic background, or more women in the sector. So those same dimensions of underrepresentation that we still have in the industry, we're trying to create scholarship opportunities for them to come over and bring their talent to our workforce and create a more inclusive environment. So in a nutshell, that's that, but it's a very ambitious program.
It is. Now, for a lot of listeners, they're probably thinking, looking at Brazil, very colorful from what they see on TV. Now, in Brazil, you would assume, if you don't know the country, that it's already very inclusive from what we see, right? So can you explain how this inclusion and this lack of diversity actually came about in Brazil and why it is actually so important to work on it? And that maybe on this side of the world here in Europe, we have a misunderstanding of what is going on in Brazil and that it might not be so inclusive as we think it is.
Of course. I mean, as a public organization, ANAC is a public governmental agency, we are always trying to consider what is best in public interest, right? And in order to do that, we need to start looking at the people we serve. So who is the population in Brazil? Who do you think of when you think of Brazil? And maybe in Europe, when you think of Brazil, you think about soccer or football, or you think about carnival and samba and so on. And of course, those are some of our best cultural expressions. And they're also things that are very much influenced by our cultural heritage from the African countries. Brazil has a huge Black population. We are the largest country in population in terms of Black people outside of the African continent. 55% of our population considers themselves either Black or brown, and that's the majority of our population. So in fact, Brazil is a Black country if you consider it in terms of population. But you don't see a lot of Black representation in positions of power or in positions of influence. So we are at the same time a deeply unequal country as well. And we have incidents of racism. For instance, we had an episode by the end of 2023. It was really telling. We had Ana Vilma, which is one of our main symbols of Carnival. She used to dance for Portela, which is one of our largest schools of samba. So in Carnival, when you see Carnival, you see the pictures of Brazil. She's one of those symbols. And she's a Black lady. She's now in her 70s. So she's in her elderly years. And she came to Brasilia, which is our capital, from Rio, where she lives, to receive an award in celebration of the Black month, the National Day of Black Conscience, which happens in November. And when she was going back, she was awarded this. She was celebrated by her contributions to our culture. So it was really, really happy and a moment of acknowledgement, of what Black culture is in Brazil and what it has to offer and how much it has to do with our identity. And when she was traveling back to Rio, where she lives, she faced an instance of prejudice. She was racially targeted at a store, and a security person asked to see her belongings, accusing her of not paying for something, which of course was not the case. And this is happening in Brazil everywhere, because although we are 55% Black, we also carry still a lot of racial bias, a lot of racial prejudice, and this creates a huge burden, not only mental, but in terms of safety and security for our Black people. And if you consider airports and aircrafts, even though we are a population majority Black, we're 55% Black, we still don't see a lot of Black people. We don't see the majority of the people traveling through airports or inside our aircraft as being Black. We don't see this representation in the same sense. And this has a lot to do also with a second dimension of inequality in Brazil, which is socioeconomic inequality. And of course, everything I'm telling you about, Francine, we have data from that. We have IBGE, which is our Institute of statistical and geographical data. They do our census. So everything is available. It's public data. And we have also socioeconomic inequality, which is also measured by IBGE. So to consider it in terms of a European view, something that you might not know, 80% of our population, they live with a monthly household income, which is lower than $500 per capita per month. So it's 2014 reais. So if you want to do the math yourself. So
Yeah.
per person per capita per month. This is 80% of our population. And we also have a huge correlation of race and income in Brazil. This is part of our inequality system that since the enslavement of Black people that were kidnapped and brought to Brazil from Africa since the Portuguese colonized Brazil, Black people have been in worse conditions than white people in Brazil. And even though they are the majority of our population, because in Brazil, we consider Black population as being both people who are Black-skinned and brown-skinned, they face challenges that are either structural challenges or even informal challenges like bias, like being followed by a security personnel in a store and being accused of stealing when you've done nothing. So this, of course, creates a lot of tension, it creates a lot of mental unsafety for Black people in Brazil, even though they are the majority of the population. There are still spaces where they feel like they don't belong. And we want to change that. So we want to make sure that every Brazilian person or every person in general that goes through an airport feels like they belong, that they don't feel threatened, that when they go through the inspection channel, for instance, to go through a security check, which is standard in our industry, right? You can't go through an airport without going through a security check. So everyone has to go through that. But we don't want Black people to have the mental burden of feeling, am I being racially targeted? Am I safe here? And this is something we want to change. And we want to address that through education. We want to educate the staff about diversity training, diversity. We have an expression here, which is literacy and diversity. That would be roughly how we would translate. So to raise awareness of how you can be excellent while catering for your population. So we cannot have excellent service in civil aviation. 55% of our population don't feel safe at our airports. Not safe because of safety security measures, not aviation security, but mentally safe that they are not being racially targeted. So this is one of the things that we want to do. But of course, we have over 30 projects with that. And I know I talk a lot, so sorry if I'm speaking a lot.
No, it's true. The psychological safety aspect is very important when going through an airport, and it's very nice that you touch on that and explain it very well. Now, what I also want to know is there resistance to this program? I'm sure, change doesn't happen overnight. And when you come with this program, people might not feel comfortable about what you're saying. How do you go about that? How does the program tackle it?
Yes. I mean, in every diverse environment, you're not going to have a consensus about everything, right? I'm happy to say that we found more supporters than haters to our programs.
Okay, that's good.
It's already a good thing, right? But of course, some people, they don't see the issue. And there's also, we have known unknowns. So the things we know, we don't know. But of course, people also have unknowns. And if you consider, for instance, a lot of the white population in Brazil, they might not see this issue because this is not something they face. They get to the airport, and this is the only instance in their lives where there is someone asking to see their belongings or asking them to go through a personal search. And this isn't triggering for them because they don't face this in other instances of their lives. So they might not be aware of how this can be really triggering for someone who grew up in a deeply unequal country and who has faced several times throughout their lives, several misunderstandings, several instances in which they were perceived as a threat or in which they were manhandled by some security personnel, and how this can affect their emotional safety and their mental safety, and how this can be triggering for them. So, of course, we want to have allies. This is not exclusively for Black people. This is not exclusively for women. This is not exclusively for low-income individuals. That's not what we're aiming at. Everyone is a focus of our program, because in a sense, we need to create a community in which everyone feels like they belong. So even if you are a white person and you never felt racially targeted anywhere, this is a problem for you too, because this is part of the country you live in. This affects your neighbor. This affects the person next to you. And to put it plainly and simply, this is plainly wrong, right?
Yeah.
We're all equal under the law. Why is it that some people and the majority of our population face a discomfort that the rest of the population are not even aware of? So, of course, we don't mean to create it's not about them against us or
Right.
racial tensions here. It's about raising awareness to create an excellent environment for everyone. And one thing we all have in common is that we all want to feel safe, right? We all want to go to an airport and know the procedures of the safety, the security procedures, they were gone through correctly. We all want to feel safe. So if you create this environment in which everyone feels safe and feel like they belong and feel like they are not being racially targeted, they understand why is it that security checks are important, and they have confidence in the system that plays that they're not being racially targeted. And if they are being racially targeted, that they have some sort of remedy for that. They can put their grievances out, and someone is going to check if that happens or not, so they can feel safe. Then I believe we create a better environment for everyone. But of course, this is only one of our examples of one of the actions we have in our program.
Yeah, so in the beginning, you mentioned a couple of actions of your program. And I know in aviation, in general, the sector, and you know that as well, is working on social sustainability heavily, especially because it was a male-dominated sector. But I feel your program is very specific in terms of the environment in Brazil, but it can be a lesson for other countries as well. So what do you think that this program can bring to improving diversity in aviation in other parts of the world?
Yes, of course. Francine, I think this being an unequal society is not exclusive of Brazil. I mean, it translates across the board in several different societies. And in our industry, we can say, we have the data, we can say that gender inequality is a reality anyway. So in Europe, in Brazil, and in South America, in North America, and everywhere you look, you have gender disparities in the industry. And the fact is that ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, which is a specialized agency of the UN, the United Nations, that oversees international aviation everywhere, in case anyone is not from the civil aviation industry, they estimate that until 2034, in a little over 10 years, we're going to have double the amount of air traffic we have right now. Industry is already facing scarcity in recruitment. In some careers, you already are having trouble finding talented people, passionate people, trained people to go into some careers. And all the while, the industry is still recruiting on less than 10% women. If you consider Brazil, and if you consider like the ratio I mentioned, we have 55% of our population, is Black. You don't see this representation in some careers. You don't see Black people. You don't see 55% of Black pilots. You don't see 55% of Black people in the industry. So we're losing talent. That's what's happening. We're missing out on an opportunity to reach out and take the best out of our population. 51% of the Brazilian population is female, and 55% is Black. So where are those people in our industry, in which careers they are, because they are in some careers, but a lot of the time they are in the careers that they have the lowest wages or that have the lowest barriers to training, because there's also a huge correlation between income and race in Brazil. So if we don't start creating opportunities as a public organization, and if industry don't start creating opportunities for women to go into those careers, for Black people to go into those careers, for low income people to have training opportunities to reduce those barriers, we're not going to be able to face the challenge of doubling the air traffic in 10 years.
Right.
Because we won't have the people to pilot those aircraft, to maintain those aircraft, to do the ground handling, to have the interface with customer service. So aviation is such a diverse career already. And what I mean by a diverse career is I'm a lawyer. I'm working in aviation. I mean, we have psychologists working in aviation.
Right.
You have something for everyone in aviation. If you feel passionate about aviation, but you don't want to become a pilot, there are several different careers for you. And still, we see underrepresentation of those groups in most of those careers. And this creates a challenge for growth, because we're made out of people, right? It's a very technologically induced industry, but still, it's the people behind it that are innovating, that are making services better. So we need to focus on people. And in Brazil, we're missing out on the diverse talent of our population.
Yes, it's like you said, aviation is for everyone. If you even want to be a social media manager in aviation, it's possible. So this program, Wings for All, it actually doesn't apply only, we could say, for the aviation industry, but all industries that are having similar issues in terms of social sustainability, right? So are there any collaborations with other industries besides airlines or airports? How does it work with the stakeholders for Wings for All and the partnership? Because I'm sure questions are going to come out of here.
Yes. Well, right now we have several partners, both public partners and private partners. So one of our projects is a cooperation agreement within government. So we have 5 different ministries that are cooperating with the industry to make this happen, with the agency to make this happen. And then we have an interstate cooperation agreement with more than 10 different private partners. And this is the part that I feel like it's such a gift to be able to work with that. And I feel so blessed to be able to work with that, because you get to meet so many like-minded people that want to make a difference in this, like yourself, Francine. I met you because of Wings for All, right?
Yes.
It's so nice to see there are so many people in the industry and in government that are really committed to making this change happen. And of course, the ESG agenda is something that came to stay. It has a huge correlation with the 2030 agenda of the Sustainable Development Goals. Our Wings for All, it creates a path for us to advance in the SDGs 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, and 10, which is quality of education, because we really focus on education, gender inequality, infrastructure, and economic growth, reducing inequalities. Those are all sustainable development goals, those that I mentioned. And our projects, they all help advance this agenda. But they're really, really focused right now on the civil aviation industry. This is the first year of our program. It was officially externally launched on April this year, but we've been working on it for a year now. It actually just made its birthday on September. So since we started,
Congratulations.
yeah. So there's a lot to come. We're just like putting a small grain of sand out there. And in these efforts, we have talked to different agencies, for instance. We talked to all different regulatory agencies, because we are a regulatory agency, right? Where we focus on civil aviation. We have other regulatory agencies in Brazil that focus on health, on quality of health, for instance, or that focus on quality of water. And we talk to them to learn from what they're doing. And something that, for instance, everyone is doing, and something that we're cooperating across the divide of industries, is fighting sexual harassment. This is a huge agenda right now for governments in Brazil. And it's, of course, really connected to SDG, which deals with gender inequality. Data shows that women tend to select themselves out of harassment environments, or environments in which harassment is rampant and which they have no remedy for harassment. And this makes a lot of sense, right? Why would you stay in a place where you're being harassed, either sexually or morally harassed? And this is something we have change experiences with. For instance, with a similar agency we have here, which is the ports, the regulation of ports in Brazil. They are connected to the same ministry we are. So we have exchanged some experiences with them in terms of how to fight sexual harassment. And one of our projects that we launched has to do with creating a respectful culture, which is so much more than just fighting sexual harassment, right? Because a respectful culture is one in which everyone feels like they're not being made fun of, or they're not being targeted by something that's deeply connected to their identity, be it gender, be it sexual orientation, be it racial identity. So to create a respectful culture is a culture in which everyone feels safe because they don't feel like they're being disrespected fundamentally by
Correct.
some aspect of who they are. So yes, there are some crossovers, but this, to be completely frank, it's a minor part of our efforts. Our efforts are right now really focused on aviation.
Sometimes I feel that inclusion is teaching people the basics of respect, right? How to respectfully talk to somebody, work with someone. It's kind of like, did we lose it somewhere or was it never there?
Well, I mean, I think we all carry our structural biases within us. I would be lying to you if I said I'm always the respectful person. I mean, we all grew up, and I think Europe is not very different from Brazil in this sense.
Definitely not.
We all grew up in structurally biased societies in which we learned unconsciously that some patterns are correct and some patterns are incorrect. If you think of a pilot, we'll all most likely go to think of a white man when we think of a pilot, because this is part of our structural biases that we carry within us that tells us where women belong, where Black people belong, what we want to create is a culture in which everyone belongs anywhere they want. There's no specific niche in which women should go to, or men should go to, or Black people should go to. And of course, those unconscious biases, they are informal barriers, but they also affect how we interact with one another, but they also affect how we ourselves set our own limitations. How we ourselves, as women, we both identify as women, right, Francine? How we consider, can I be a pilot if I'm a woman? And we would be lying if we said that this is not a problem we would need to deal ourselves as well. So in a sense, we are also the targeted audience of this program, because it's a work in progress to deconstruct all
Just
the
unlearn.
layers of
You have to
bias.
unlearn and relearn.
Yes, and sometimes we might make a comment that on a deeper reflection, we should think, I made someone feel uncomfortable with this comment. I made someone feel unsafe with this comment. I shouldn't have done it. And this process of unlearning those biases, I think it needs to start with ourselves. So if we just point the finger and say, people, like, we're not those people, right? People need to start learning how to treat each other correctly. Then we're creating us, I guess, against them sort of
Right.
environment.
We're also privileged that we can learn how to be inclusive, and we have the opportunity to unlearn and relearn and redo, and that we're knowledgeable about it. So that again is a privilege that we do carry.
And I still learn a lot. I mean, I learned a lot with you in our interactions, and I hope to continue to learn as long as I live. So it's a work in progress. And if you consider like the layers of social inequality that I mentioned in Brazil, and if you consider particularly the lowest income professions we have, a lot of those people didn't have opportunity to learn about that. We can't, in a way, point a finger and say they are lacking education because it's something that we had access to because of our social economic. I had access to. I had the leisure to learn about those things. I had educated parents that put me in contact with those things. This might not be the reality for a lot of people. So it's not about making them feel ashamed how the act of how their previous behavior was. It's about creating an environment in which everyone has the opportunity to grow and learn and to create a better environment for everyone.
Thank you so much. I learned so much when you presented this program from the first time. I learned a lot about Brazil that I didn't know. You really made me aware of the country and what was going on in the history. Now, one last question that I have for you. Where do you see the program in 5 to 10 years?
Well, my hope is that the program continues to grow. I think we can only put a small grain of sand in making the difference. So I think the hugest achievement we have is creating awareness around it, because then a lot of people start thinking, I've been doing something like that as well. Maybe we should talk to Anak and see if we can cooperate. And then you start creating this wave in which it's not even what you have done anymore, you as an institution, you as an organization have done anymore, because it's being multiplied. It creates this momentum in which the thing grows. So hopefully in 5 years, we're going to have a full scholarship program rolling on, in which we'll have like, I don't know, maybe 200, 300, maybe I'm being too ambitious, scholarships to give to low-income individuals per year, every year. Right now, we face challenges in budgets. We have fiscal obligations in our legislations. And for instance, to give a scholarship for a pilot, it's very expensive. It's roughly $33,000 to become a commercial pilot in Brazil. We're not even talking about like airline pilot, which would be even more money just to get to the commercial pilot stage, $33,000. Although our the population is living with less than 400
500
per capita per month. If you don't create scholarships, if you don't bring in money either from government or from the industry to create those opportunities, we're going to miss out on talent, because we're going to only be recruiting on the top of the social economic pyramid. Only rich people can afford nowadays to dream of becoming pilots.
Right.
And in this first year, we've given 20 scholarships for pilots. And in every initiative of scholarships, we reserve 50% of the spots for women. So they're all targeted for low-income individuals. So you need to come from a low-income background to access those scholarships. And once you do, 50% are for women, because we want to target intersectionality of inequality, right? It's
Right.
low income, but it's also women. And we've done 100 scholarships for mechanics in Brazil this year. So this is a little less expensive for us, the 100 scholarships, but it's not as costly as training a pilot, but it's still a lot of money. And we want the program to grow and to gain support, not only from the industry, but also the political support that will help us make this a permanent program. And something that in 5 or in 10 years, we're going to have generations and generations of people who were trained through a grant from a bursary from the Wings for All program. And this will make part of the history of civil aviation in Brazil. So this is a dream.
Let's make this a call to action as well for all the listeners, whether they're in a private company or in the aviation industry, that if they want to sponsor Wings for All, they can reach out to us, hello@consultancy.be. We will put you in touch with Ana and help you sponsor this program. Let's just make this also a fundraiser call, because it would be lovely to have more people to enter this program. I want to see what you just said.
Thank you, Francine. And if anyone want to know more about our program, you can Google Wings for All and Anak, Brazil, and you're going to get into our website. It's only in Portuguese for now. There are a lot of tools of translation right now, so I think everyone can get a sense of what is it that we are working on.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Ana. It was lovely having you on the podcast. It was a bit longer than usual, but everybody had to hear what you have to say.
Thank you so much, Francine.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.